virtual kickoff, but in advance of a 2021 season that I think we're all looking forward to. Obviously, this is a year for us that we've been anticipating for some time, as our young players have now started to arrive on our major league roster. They have had some opportunity. Guys like Kyle Lewis, Evan White, Justice Sheffield, J.P. Crawford, so many others over these last 2 years, but particularly year and a half, have had an opportunity to cut their teeth at the major league level. We feel like this is another opportunity for a big step forward in achieving our goals and building a young core that has a chance to compete consistently for championships at the big league level. And we feel like we've never been closer than we are today to that reality, and excited for the start of 2021. And we're about a month out, and hopefully, fingers crossed, with the public health and safety in mind, we are able to get there and watch players play. It'll be refreshing for all of us. With that, I'll take any questions you might have, and we'll go from there.
A question from Ryan Divish.
Okay, Jerry, you just said you've never been closer. What are your expectations going into this season? I know last year was about getting experience for these players. You still have some guys you need to get experience, but what are realistic expectations for this team going forward? I know you and Scott were very bullish at the end of the season, but where are you at with that?
Right where we were at the end of the season. We feel like the next steps for this team are to continue to integrate the young players to this roster. We feel like there are another handful who are not far off. We'll see once we get down to Peoria and as we progress into the season, but a handful of our more polished or advanced prospects that will have an opportunity in 21. And first and foremost, it's to gain that experience, to continue to grow the base with the guys that I mentioned earlier, Chef and Kyle and Evan and the like, and then introduce the next group with the idea that if things break well for us and we get into midsummer and we stay close to this thing and we do have an opportunity to sneak up on the back of the playoff field, that's a possibility for us and would be a goal. It's young teams tend to gel quicker than you might think. We can't go in expecting that we're going to run to the top of the American League West, but I think we can set the goal of competing for a playoff spot, and we'll see how it goes. And if we take a step toward that in 2021, I think that would be a great achievement for our organization.
A question from Corey Brock.
Hi, Jerry. You talked at the end of the year about upgrading the bullpen. You've gone to, appears, great lengths to add some arms at the back end there, especially a lot of arms that could miss bats. Are you sort of speak in generalities about how much more comfortable or excited you are about this group moving forward into this season?
But on paper and even emotionally, it's a better group. There's more major league experience. There's more major league performance history with this group than there was a year ago. So naturally, the expectation is that we're in better shape than we were to start the 2020 season. And, that we had set a pretty low bar. Our bullpen has really been an area of struggle over these past 2 years. And while we've been able to get a good look at some of our younger guys and give them opportunity, some have taken the opportunity and run with it. I guess most notably, Anthony Mashevitz stands out. But for every one of those opportunities, we've fallen short in some other areas. So we did focus on beefing up this space and heading into the offseason. And we feel like we've done that. The trade that brought Rafael Montero in, bringing Kendall Graveman back in free agency, going out and bringing in Keenan Middleton. The theme with all of those players is that we feel like either A, we know a lot about them in the case of a Kendall Graveman or even in the case of Keenan Middleton, but also the idea that we are trying not only to focus on getting better in 21, but finding ways to continue to progress for 22 and beyond. And, to that matter, Keenan Middleton is now part of the roster and comes with 3 years of remaining control through arbitration. Rafael Montero still has 2 years of club control on his agreement, and we feel like we are starting to build some stability into a bullpen that really hasn't been very stable over the last couple of years. And if we have the opportunity to add to that group between now and the start of the season, we will. And I can't say that will be a primary focus between now and February 19th, but it remains part of our focus. We'd like to continue to add to our club, and that's one area, but we feel like we've gone a long way toward making that a more reliable unit than maybe it has been the last 2 years.
Larry Stone has a question.
Hi, Jerry. I was just wondering what you think of the relatively slow pace of free agency industry-wide, and do you expect to continue to dip into the market beyond the bullpen for other areas, starting pitching, outfield, or something else?
Yeah, I guess I'll answer in reverse. We are active right now and have been throughout the offseason and trying to get better. And that was largely focused on our pitching, adding Chris Flexen, like I talked about, Kendall Graveman, Rafael Montero, Keenan Milton. We don't feel like we've been quiet or slow. If that's what it seems to you all, I apologize. I know it's not our normal rate of activity, but that is more where we are in our build, truly. So, we've added quite a bit to our team already. It has been a slow to develop off-season market, particularly at the top of free agency, but that hasn't really been a focus for us. I think you have seen over the course of, particularly this last 4 or 5 weeks, that the market is moving, and you're starting to see a lot of players that you recognize, recognizable names coming off the board, especially in that bullpen. And, those are generally areas where we've been connected. I don't think a reliever is signed yet that we didn't have some conversation with or about, either internally or with agents, et cetera. We have been fairly connected in trade discussions, although trades, they ebb and flow. You could see a flurry and then see nothing at all. But we continue to be connected to free agents we think can make us better. And specifically, we would like to add a little bit more depth to that bullpen if it's possible. We are open to adding another starting pitcher and increasing our depth in the rotation, again, if that's possible. And we would like to add a left-handed bat to our mix. And whether that is a versatile player who has multi-position ability, or it's in the outfield or at second base, those are alternatives for us. Right now, those are the least secure positions we have with a returning player or veteran. And, we have the benefit of the versatility of a player like a Dylan Moore or Ty France or Sam Haggerty that allow us to be able to address needs based on the best fit for the team and then adjust as we go.
Tim Booth.
Hey, Jerry. Do you have a feel yet for how much, from a developmental standpoint, the timeline of some of your top prospects might have been stunted by not having a true minor league season this year? Or is that something that'll sort of play out through spring training and into the first part of the season?
I think it'll be the latter part of that, Tim. We truly don't know. And that makes us one of 30 teams that truly don't understand the effects of the shortened season on young player development. No minor league season was a setback. There's no question about that. So, what and frankly, we weren't able to replicate that volume either at the alternate site or what we were doing down in the Florida player development programs and Arizona Instructional League. So, we have to be aware that there could be a delay in the way some of those players come through. But I don't go into it, especially with the elite level prospects, thinking that that's going to be a long delay. As I said, with the major league club, you tend to see big jumps with young players once they get comfortable at a level. And with the young prospects of elite talent, that it's the same way. You could see guys like a Julio Rodriguez or a Jared Kelnick or a Logan Gilbert. They will not miss it as much as some others who might have needed that step by step. So we're we're going to be open-minded to using 2021 as an opportunity to move some of those guys a little quicker, if that's what it appears is good for their development. And if they need more time, we're going to be receptive to that as well. We're not in a rush. We are here we're playing the long game with our roster. We believe this is an opportunity to open a window and keep a window open for the foreseeable future. We've built a lot of prospect cachet. We've acquired and developed a number of young players for our roster, and we still have a long way to go for that roster to be fully developed and ready to compete consistently at a championship level. And we can't rush those young players because we'll do more harm than good and so doing. So, we'll take it case by case. And my guess is that the more advanced of those prospects will progress quicker. And the guys that were at the lower levels of the minor leagues and needed more time are going to require more time. And that's just something we're going to have to adapt to.
Danny O'Neill has a question.
This might be tied to Tim's question, Jerry, but who do you see in the next wave of prospects? You kind of mentioned that first group of Justice Sheffield and Justin Dunn, Kyle Lewis getting here. Who are the guys that you see in the next wave that could be soonest to get to Seattle?
The obvious for us are Logan Gilbert, who I think among our group is the closest to major league preparedness. He's just where he is emotionally, what he does physically. He was outstanding at the alt site during the summer last year. We do have to be conscious of where his innings are, and my preference would be with all young players is just to give them the opportunity to onboard at the appropriate pace. But Logan stands out, as does Jared Kelnick, Cal Raleigh, potentially Taylor Trammell, who we are still learning a lot about. But, he's another of those that we haven't yet seen at the major league level. Those four stand out as the next, notable wave that's coming. And then there's another group behind them that we think is not terribly far off, but to Tim's point earlier, we do need to be aware that the development may take some time. But I suspect the first three of those names I mentioned, and then Taylor, we will learn as we go. We expect that those guys will have every opportunity to make their major league debuts at some point in 21 and then start, put them in position to get the reps just as we did with the group that came before. And they're super talented players, and my guess is they'll hit the ground running when given the opportunity.
Thank you.
Question from our social channel, Kelly.
Yeah, Jerry, Kai from Facebook asks, which under-the-radar prospect do you think we will know the name of this time next year?
Well, there's a bunch. We like every other team, we love our players. It's and we have so many fun young players in our system to like. I guess from an under-the-radar perspective, the most under-the-radar would be Levi Stout. Jumps out at me. Levi was a third-round draft for us in 2019 and immediately had Tommy John surgery, has now recovered and, really was outstanding down in Arizona Instructional League. Jumped out. Stuff was in the mid-90s with 2 polished breaking balls and a good feel to pitch. He really stands out as one of those guys. On a more 40-man, close to the major leagues type of scenario, I think Juan Then is a guy who really has made a ton of progress. And Juan is one of those guys who, while he was at the alt site last year as well as Arizona Instructional League, he is just 21 years old this year. And there's so much to development in front of him. And of all of our 40-man players, he's the guy who has the chance to make the biggest step forward in 21, who already took perhaps the biggest step forward in 20. And but now that he's on the 40-man roster and the clock is ticking with options, we would anticipate a pretty quick ascent for Juan. I don't anticipate that being in 21, but I think this time next year you will be really quite surprised by the physicality of his stuff and how quickly he could come. Those are two that really jump out at me as guys that aren't generally discussed in the mainstream that have a chance to really make a huge difference or jump in 21. And from a position player perspective, I'd say that guy's probably Tyler DeLoach. He is probably one of the more under the radar, quiet, really strong. And I apologize, Zach, but we had Scott and I have an issue with that. But Deloach, our second round pick from last year, is really polished, multi-skilled, does everything well. There is no one gaudy skill other than the fact that he gets on base all the time. And he had a wonderful Arizona Instructional League after taking part in the alt-site camp, and he's another guy that I think could really pop on some radars.
Daniel Kramer.
Hey, Jerry, good to see you. I had a couple questions about the six-man rotation, something you guys have made no secret that it's, something that you want to deploy at least over the first chunk of the season. As the roster stands currently, and you kind of touched on, the possible need for an additional starting pitcher, but what might that look like at least early in the season as you break camp? And then the second one, how do the workloads of a shortened season and a young staff from last year that hasn't quite built up their innings factor into your preparation for a possible six-man rotation?
Well, the limitations on innings in 2020 is part of what our calculus was in going with a six-man rotation. And, we on multiple levels, the six-man rotation in 2020, we thought was a better way to preserve health and really further development. This is a nuance that's not going to be captured in kind of a SABR analysis of what we're doing from a performance standpoint with a six-man rotation. But the six-man rotation allows for 2 bullpen days. It allows for 2 work days in between. And when your starting pitchers are all generally aged 24 to 26 and have less than a year's experience, those work days are really important. And, it allows for pitch development and pitch shaping. It allows for training on delivery, refinement, and command. And it's not just about getting out every 5th day and performing. And it's very much still a development program. So we feel like that's a huge advantage with the six-man with such a young staff. And, it is still a young staff, and that's an important element here. So with that and understanding that the highest volume starters in 2020 were guys that threw 60 to 80 innings. And that's not a high volume of innings in the grand scheme of things. And we feel like the jump from 60 to 80 to say 140, 150 is reasonable. For the guys who might have been at the top end of that scale, to get them into a 160, 170 type of range is reasonable. Going beyond that is not likely. And we feel like this allows us to help govern that. And, we are going to start the season. I think that you can press very hard on the pen, if not, secure, if they're healthy. Marco and Chef and Kikuchi for certain will be taking their turns. Others will be given an opportunity to compete for those spots. We did sign Chris Flexen, and he will be one of our 6 starters. That allows for 2 open spots that are generally going to be competitions. And it's going to be some combination of Justin Dunn and Nick Margavicius and Logan Gilbert and perhaps others who aren't necessarily currently in the Mariners system. And it could extend to players like an LJ Newsome or minor league free agents that'll be given further opportunity. But we feel like there's still something to go add in that space. We won't go in short. We feel confident in the group that we have today. And we were very excited by some of the development with guys like Marge and like LJ Newsome and what we saw, though it was sometimes turbulent, the fact that Justin Dunn got through his first season and learned a lot. We are all going to be better for the experiences that these guys had in 2020, but we won't overload them with innings. And we do want to make sure that we still have those work days in between because it is largely a young group.
Shannon Dreyer.
And Jerry, you just answered my pitching question there, so I'll take it over to the other side. When you look at your young hitters, they got 200 to 250 at bats last season. What do you hope to know about them at about 550 to 600, which will be getting you close to that trade deadline? What do you need to know that it's going to help you make the next moves?
I think this is where you see players start to stabilize. There's a lot of turbulence in that first 300 to 500 at bats of a major league career. And then, more often than not, you're going to see guys find their water level during that time. And a lot of our players are getting into that space. Some have now graduated beyond it. And there's always going to be, a player who matures a little bit later. There's always going to be the guy who exceeds expectations a little bit sooner. But the first half of 2021 is going to be a great time for us to learn about the players who are in that 300 to 500 zone, like guys like Ty France and Evan White and Kyle Lewis. And, there's some of the young guys that haven't yet made their debuts. But this is still very much, the assess and evaluate part of the exercise with the young players. And you're going to see some ebb and flow. That's what it's like to be a young player making your way in baseball. And the 2 for 20, that's going to happen to every player in the league at some point. When it happens to a young player, once they're able to slow that down and recognize that it's the same as any other, mini slump they've ever been through, they come out of it quicker, they get back to their skill set, and they do their thing. And for whatever reason, it's usually about that 2/3 of a season of major league experience when guys really start to breathe. So July, August of that first year, and what we're now understanding with the truncated 2020 season is it's more the volume. If we can get these guys to, that 450, 600 range, that's when you really start to see the player settle into who they're going to be. And we're pretty confident that we learned a lot about this group last year, and we'll learn even more in the first 2 or 3 months of this year.
Ryan Divish.
Hey, Jerry, there's been a lot of discussion about how much a 60-game season without fans affected teams financially. Did the COVID season and not having fans and everything else change what you wanted to do this offseason from a acquisition standpoint? Did your payroll budget change? Did any of that change what you plan to do maybe going in this offseason, whereas a full year might have been different?
Economically, no, frankly. Our program was set up to develop these young players. So it's where there is I guess a little bit of ambiguity is that if we would have had the full season in 2020 to give all of our offensive players those 400, 500, 600 plate appearances, if we would have been able to achieve 100, 150 innings for those starters or the type of exposure that would be needed to evaluate those relievers, that may have given us greater clarity on where our primary needs were for 22 and beyond. So to the extent that affects the way we go out and spend our future payroll dollars, it certainly does. We still need to find out about our young players and where we need the help. We can spin around the field, and from what we talked about earlier with multi-position, diverse, flexible, athletic players like Dylan Moore or Haggerty or France, on down to young players who are still evolving as everyday players in the big leagues, like Evan and Kyle, and the returns of Mitch Haniger and Tom Murphy and the evolution of JP Crawford. At every position on the field, we feel like we have the current and future best solution for the Mariners. Now we have to find out how they progress. And we weren't in a position headed into 21 where we felt confident that we had seen enough in making that evaluation. Therefore, we weren't going to go add to our roster beyond 21 in ways that was going to limit the exposure for those young players. So it's a little bit of a nuance, but it had nothing to do for us. It had nothing to do with the revenues or economic issues that clubs may have experienced in 2020. It had everything to do with the model we were creating. And 60 games just didn't give us enough time to answer a lot of the questions we needed to answer. And we don't want to go out and falsely fill spots that we probably or could perhaps have the answer already here. We just need to give them playing time.
Tim Booth.
Jerry, excuse me, Jerry, you mentioned Mitch there. I'm wondering if you can give an update on where he's at with his recovery and what's reasonable expectations for him? And then along with that, updates on Shed and Andres Munoz and their recoveries from their injuries.
Sure. Mitch looks great. For those of you who follow Mitch on social media, the posts he's made, he looks terrific physically. Our assistant hitting coach, Jarrett DeHart, went and visited Mitch live and spent a little bit of time with him and came away gushing. How good he looks physically is the takeaway. As all of you know, this has been a tough year and a half for Mitch, not playing, the emotion that goes with not playing. But more importantly, none of us, myself, maybe most especially, really understood the significance of the two injuries that he was trying to recover from and rehabilitate at the same time. And what he looks like today as opposed to what he looked like this time last year is entirely different. He looks strong. He looks physical. He's going through full baseball activity in a high-speed way that he just wasn't able to do at any point over the last year and a half. So we're really excited about seeing Mitch come in, and it's the identification is when Mitch Haniger's healthy, he's our best player. Mitch is a multi-skilled, well-rounded, diverse player who, when we've seen him at the top of his game, is really one of the more complete players in the American League. And if we can get some version of that Mitch Haniger back on the field, it really changes our arc, and we know that he's going to play his 30-year-old season this year. Nobody is more attentive to the way they keep and take care of their body than Mitch. And we feel like he still has his best years as a player in front of him. And we're going to find out how close that is to reality when we get down to Peoria next month. As far as Shed goes, JD also visited with Shed. Looks great. Swinging the bat, doing all of the baseball activity, has recovered very quickly. And, that's a positive sign. Shed will come into spring training and compete, whether for that open spot at second base with Dylan Moore or the opportunity to get utility at bats. We've given Shed some exposure, moving him out to the outfield and other spots. He's an athletic player, so we think he's going to come in 100% ready to play. And then Andres Munoz. Andres will not be ready for opening day. He is throwing off the mound, and his progression has been steady. He will be about a year in his recovery from Tommy John when we are down in Peoria. So right about the middle of March, he gets to that 12-month mark. And if we're being conservative, it's usually a 12 to 15-month recovery from Tommy John. We would rather err on the side of caution. But Andres he's been throwing free and easy for quite some time now. He feels great, and the PTs have been very positive about where he is in his recovery.
We have a question from Larry Stone.
Yeah, Jerry, I was just wondering, as the season nears, if you have a better feel for whether spring training will start on time. It'll be a normal spring training, 162-game season. Do you expect expanded playoffs again, the pinch runner and extra innings, 7-inning double, second game of doubleheaders, that sort of thing? Do you have a feel for how the season's going to look?
I think we're going back. Well, the real answer to that question, as I understand it, we are going to play by what we would qualify as normal rules. So 26-man roster, we are going to play, hopefully, we're going to play a 162-game season with what would have been a normal postseason and roster scenario with expected rules like we would have played with in 2019 rather than the adjusted versions in 2020. That's the expectation. And be flexible and nimble to as we get closer to opening day, like was the case last year. If something leads us in a different direction between now and the time we start to play, whether that is discussion at the league level or beyond, we'll make any adjustments we have to. But we are going into the 21 season just like we would have if this were 2019, with the expectation that there'll be 10 postseason teams, 162-game schedule, a full spring training, normal travel, and no restrictions outside of the obvious need to have health and safety protocols in place while we deal with the ongoing pandemic.
Question from Corey Brock.
Jerry, in terms of Evan White, we saw a lot of good things with his batted ball profile. Certainly the 42% strikeout rate wasn't anything that he's seen at all in the past. A young guy finding his way. What are the encouraging signs that you've seen from him moving forward to lead you to believe that he'll continue to develop as a hitter?
I mean, you hit on some of them there, Corey. Evan hits the ball hard, and it's something we really stressed when he was coming from Arkansas to Seattle. He's an athletic player, does a lot of things well. He has generally had a strong batted ball profile that carried over to his major league exposure experience. He hit the ball hard and did so among the players in the world who hit the ball the hardest. He stood out in that regard. So, the issue with Evan in 2020 was nothing more than the anxiety that goes with a young player starting from zero. And when he slumped early, he allowed it to start to roll on him. And he caught it. He had a run from the middle of August to the middle of September where he was quite good. And we think the batted ball profile, in addition to all of the trends that he's shown through his player development. Evan's not a guy that we think has a high strikeout probability. He is a guy who does and always has been willing to take his walk, and he swings at the right pitches and he hits them hard. And what we saw last year, I think, helped go a long way toward reassuring us in our optimism of what his power profile might look like. He does have the ability to drive the ball in the gaps, and the over the fence power exists as well. So, we think if we can get Evan back on track in terms of his pitch selection was quite fine. There were a lot of misses in there that just haven't been part of Evan's normal package or profile. And that we feel like is just an anomaly rather than the new norm for Evan White.
We have a question off our social channels. Kelly?
Jerry, Anthony L. from Facebook asked, how difficult is it going to be to scout amateur players this year for the draft?
Really difficult. It's funny, I had a conversation about that this morning with Scott Hunter, our scouting director. It's the challenge exists right now, like with Major League Spring Training starting next month. We are expecting the college seasons to start next month. The junior college seasons start now. They're starting in January. So, we are preparing to get up and moving. Our focus in the early going is going to be on what we consider to be the top tier of the high school talent pool. And getting as much volume with those players as we can in the early days of their playing schedules, because they're the players we've seen the least. Part of the challenge that we have in 21 is that, unlike in 20, at least in 2020, we had the summer of 19 to fall back on and the fall of the previous season. So we did have some information to bring to the table with the college players in 2020. That's not necessarily the case as we head into 21. There was no Cape Cod League. The volume that the players saw in the summer and how frequently we were able to see them was very different than it has historically been. And as a result, we go into this year treating those bigger conference colleges, the ACC, the SEC, the PAC, those are conferences that we are going to spend weekends just sitting on to make sure that we get a high volume with a lot of those players that will really fill in the gaps in the top 10 rounds of a draft and make sure that we get as much familiarity with players that we may have had, 100, 150, 200 plate appearances with going into their normal draft season. And this year we're probably dealing with less than 50. So again, just like with our young players, we have to be patient. We have to understand that the system's not going to be perfect and go make the best evaluations and selections we can. But that's how we're planning on approaching it.
We have a question from Lauren Smith.
Hi, Jerry. Now that JP Crawford's been here for a couple years and kind of become a leader in your infield, what do you see as the next steps for him?
JP, to me, the forward progress that JP made, in 2020 was extraordinary. And I think the best thing about what happened with JP, I could easily point to the Gold Glove, but that's just I guess a public acknowledgement of excellence that we saw every day, and not unwelcome. It's great. And he'll be able to look at it for the rest of his career and hopefully have more. But the thing that excites me most about JP is that he doesn't come out of his approach. And that is the sign of developing maturity at the major league level. He swings at the right pitches. He makes good swing decisions in the box. He does have a mature approach. And we think a mature approach coupled with aesthetically a good swing. JP's always had a good swing. We think there's more offensive ceiling to him. But the way he stabilized our infield defensively and really as a captain on the field, and while he wasn't carrying gaudy offensive numbers, the consistency in his approach from beginning to end, I thought was a real standout. And we've always talked, we with the Mariners have always talked about the reliance on process over result. JP's process in 2020 was outstanding. And, the offensive results we feel like will eventually start catching up with his process. He's still a very young guy, just like it happened with his defense. He's minimally, he's here for, another 4 years, and we're excited to have him as part of what we're doing. And as importantly, he really fits in our clubhouse. JP's got an easy way about him, a calm that he brings to his teammates, and he plays the game, under control with athleticism and adjustability. And I'm very impressed with the way his season went for him last year, because he developed mature programs that have the chance to give him, a stable foundation to build on as he grows forward.
And a question from Daniel Kramer.
Hey, Jerry, wanted to ask you about the catching situation. Scott talked about it a little bit in December, but, Thorens had a really nice September, and Murphy obviously had a big 2019. How will you kind of balance those guys' time as you enter camp here?
Shocker that Scott would talk about the catching situation in advance of anything else. But there's just like that. Murph is 2019. You couldn't be too much better than Murph was for us and the opportunities he had. He can catch. He controls the run game. He's got power. And it's off the charts makeup. Murph is very much a key to our game day preparation, the way we manage and communicate with our pitchers. And like you said, there's a reason why we went out and acquired Luis Thorens. And we feel like if there is a player, and this might have gone to Kelly's question earlier about surprising names, it might be throwing a guy out there who has a year and a half of major league service as an under the radar guy. The way we evaluate Luis Thorens is probably very different than the way the public may perceive Luis Thorens. We feel like he has every chance of being an above-average offensive player at his position. You haven't seen the best of what he does defensively yet. His pitch framing skills have been well regarded through the minor leagues, as we see through our statistical lens or analytical lens. And our goal would be going into the season for the two of them to share the position, some type of 50-50, 55-45 split, giving both opportunity to play regularly. And there will come a time in the season, and I would imagine in 21, not too many teams go through with two catchers without having some type of hiccup. It's a tough position to play. But we would anticipate, providing some opportunity for Cal Raleigh somewhere in the season, whether that is late in the season or as a call up at the end. We do feel like Cal is also a really bright part of our future, and it's exciting to talk about a catching depth in a positive way, and it's something we feel like we've done a decent job in building with this group.
And a question from Kieran O'Dwyer.
Hi, Jerry. Similar to you talked about the short season and the challenges I presented last year. Similar to your thoughts on Evan and JP, what were some of the other key encouraging signs and takeaways that came to light from last year that gives you promise heading into the 2021 season, and as it relates to the club's plan for 2021 and beyond?
For me, far and away, the most positive development that we had was that we had a young group of energetic players come to the big leagues and create an energy-driven environment. It was thoughtful. The group is prepared. They made adjustments as we go. We believed that in planning for 2020, when we started this version of where we are as an organization following the 2018 season, and I will defer to whatever Ryan would like to call it today. But we will, when we started building this roster, the idea was to trend toward 2021, believing that we could compete for an AL West championship. And along the way, we had a pandemic, and we had to at least assess where we were. But the reality is that we saw a young group struggle for the first 4 weeks, 5 weeks of the 2020 season, and then find their groove. And during the second half of even the shortened season, I think over the last 30, 35 games, we had one of the best records in the American League and the best record in the American League West. Better than the Astros, better than the A's, better than the Angels over the end of that season. While we don't necessarily believe that portends that we are the best team in the division and ready to roll, that does show growth and maturity with a young group, that they were able to get through a collective struggle and find ways to go out and compete and win games. That was a positive development. The way we handled a really difficult year, whether it was the health and I guess the protocol-driven environment we were working in, our players were unbelievably responsible. And, they went through what I think has to be the most difficult season that a major league player has ever had to prepare to deal with. They went through it, and they did it with no previous experience, not just in how to behave as big leaguers and how to carry themselves in that light, but to how to deal with this type of world environment and health environment that we're working in. I thought that was remarkable. And then couple with it that we had a club that was very well represented with African-American players. I think by far the highest percentage of African-American players on rosters in Major League Baseball. And in a time of social or civic unrest, I could not have been prouder of the way our young players responded and our leaders led. And that was those were the things that stood out to me most was how we handled ourselves in real life situations, how we grew in the face of adversity on all levels, and the energy with which we did it. Because I think it has a chance to make this a special group when you couple it with what we think is an extremely talented group of young players. And I don't even know if that's debatable. They are extremely talented. It's just a matter of how quickly we grow and refine those talents.
Question from Keizo Kanishi.
Yes. Hi, Jerry. Can you describe about hiring Kuma as a special assistant coach? And also, how much do you expect his effect for those youngsters, lining up?
Yeah, Kuma, it's funny. Back in 2016, 2017, my first 2 years here with the Mariners, I was fortunate enough to work with Kuma. We had him 2016 as perhaps our steadiest, not even perhaps, he was our steadiest starter and carried the water for a rotation that was often beat up and never really seemed to be fully healthy. And he did it sometimes having to hold himself together from a health perspective. And I think one of the best quiet competitors that I've ever been around, always prepared, incredibly respectful teammate and friend to the others in the clubhouse. He has a professionalism about him that jumps off the page. And in 2017, when we let Kuma know that we wouldn't be bringing him back as a player, I said to him, on the day when you decide that you want to start your next career, whatever that is, if you want to work in front offices, if you want to work in scouting, if you want to work in connecting with players and in coaching, just call me. And lo and behold, this offseason, he called me and he said, I'm ready for that. So, I got a text from him. I want to say it was early October. I got a text from Kuma telling me that he was interested in starting the next stage in his career. And for those of you who know Hisashi, he is unbelievably respectful of every step. Didn't want to move too fast. Didn't want to bite off more than he could chew, but did want to step in and start to learn. And we think he can make an immediate difference with such a young rotation. We think he can make an immediate difference in helping us communicate in a different way with Yusei and helping him grow. I know the two of them have some relationship. And I know that even as it pertains to developing our young starters, the George Kirbys and Emerson Hancocks and Logan Gilberts and Brandon Williamsons at the minor league level, they will learn a lot from Hisashi. There is no language barrier when it's the professionalism that he carries. It jumps off the page. So thrilled to have him as part of what we're doing. We will integrate him slowly so that he's not, being pushed too fast or being overwhelmed, but feel like he has a chance to really make a difference because of who he is. He's the type of person that we want to connect with our young players and help drive our future programming.
Thank you.
All right, I think we have time for two more questions. We'll start with Tim Booth.
Jerry, you guys were pretty successful last season about not having COVID sort of enter your clubhouse. Have you had any issues with players coming down with the virus during the off season? And how do you expect the protocols to be similar or different than what you experienced last summer as you go into spring training?
To answer the first part, yes, we have, and I'm sure that makes us just like every other club. It is a raging pandemic, so we've had it hit our doorstep and probably continues to through our major and minor league clubs and staff. But how we anticipate that playing out in 21, we know that there will be health and safety protocols in place. We believe that we learned a lot in 2020 as a league on how best to manage it. We've also been able to observe the other major sports leagues and how they've handled it. And, when we started this, we were kind of first to flight and it was a challenge, with us, with the NBA having to figure out how to manage this type of health issue while the games go on. And I think MLB, the Players Association, did a phenomenal job of finding a resolution in 2020. And a lot of the protocols that we put into place will be replicated. And I'm sure that we're going to get guidance from, health and safety authorities that are going to point us in the right direction. What that looks like, I don't know. But we are prepared for what protocols look like today for the start of spring training. We have them in hand. We are versed and ready to go. It looks a lot like it looked for us at the start of summer camp last year, with a little bit more, or I guess a little bit less of a bubble format type feeling to it. But there's still going to be a lot of restrictions, and that's justifiable based on where we are in terms of public health and safety.
And our final question today from Chris Talbot.
Thank you. I'm just curious, two questions. Curious about vaccines, just following up on Tim's question. And then could you talk about your relationship with Scott, how you guys have evolved over the years? Are you in lockstep with all of these decisions? And I would think that it would be extremely stressful for a manager to churn so many players through over a 2 or 3 year period. So I wonder if you could talk about how he handles that as well.
Sure. And I think the first, I'll go back. Chris, can you repeat the front end of that question one more time?
Yeah, I'm sorry. You didn't mention vaccines and all the COVID questions. I'm just curious about how the team's handling that.
Yeah, well, the team, we really don't handle vaccines. We'll wait for our turn in line, and that's going to be a state-by-state decision, and we'll wait for Washington State and or Arizona state authorities to tell us when it's our turn. I think that's the appropriate way to respond, and we're not expecting as a sports league or even as the Mariners to jump the line. That's not how this will work. So, we don't anticipate, nor are we expecting any widespread access to vaccines before the start of spring training or really anytime soon. So we'll wait until we're informed at a higher level and go that route. As far as my relationship with Scott, I think I have a great relationship with Scott. You know, I believe in him. I believe in the direction that he takes the team. Are we in lockstep and agree with everything? No, which I think makes us normal. You know, there's he will disagree with something that I have in mind, and vice versa, and that type of push and pull in any type of relationship, be it personal or professional, is required. You have to have that to be successful. And but we are in lockstep on what we believe in terms of building culture, building clubhouse environments, and from a baseball perspective, what we think works in terms of how you score runs and the best way to achieve, getting 27 outs a night. It's to that end, we agree on most baseball matters. There are going to be personnel issues, lineup constructions, things where I defer to him, and there are going to be player acquisition or roster building, decisions where he's going to defer to me, and that's healthy. And there's going to be some white space in between where we just disagree, and that's okay, because if you don't have that, you really don't have a relationship. If you can't have that type of back and forth.
Thank you, Jerry. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, both fans and media.